Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the National Center on Intensive Intervention's webinar on practice-based opportunities for intensive intervention. This webinar is the second in a professional learning series for faculty and professional development providers that is being hosted by the center. My name is Lindsay Hayes, and I work for the National Center on Intensive Intervention at the American Institutes for Research. Today I'm joined by two colleagues. The first is Amy Colpo, who also works at the National Center on Intensive Intervention at the American Institutes for Research. And the second is Dr. Tara Kazarowski of Illinois State University, who is going to be sharing some very interesting information today about video-enhanced performance feedback. So we're very excited to have her with us today. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. First thing first, if you have any technical questions during the webinar, please put your questions in the chat pod. For any technical issues, we'll have a team member try to assist you as soon as possible. If you have a content-related question for one of the presenters, we're going to have a time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So again, use that chat pod feature to submit your questions. We'll share them with the presenters and get those answered at the end of our time today. I know a very common question is, where can I access the handouts and slide deck from today? So within our GoToWebinar platform, we actually have that loaded in as a handout today. So within your menu panel, you should see a space for the handout, and that is where you can download the slide deck for today. If you don't see that, or for some reason that isn't working for you, at the end of the presentation, we'll show you where on the National Center for Intensive Intervention website you can access today's recording and slide deck, as well as the recordings from the previous webinars. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about the purpose of the Faculty Professional Learning Series. The National Center on Intensive Intervention, or NCII for short, is funded through the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs. NCII's mission is to build district and school capacity to support implementation of intensive intervention, specifically for students with severe and persistent learning and behavioral needs. As part of our charge, we are also providing support to institutions of higher education, hence this professional learning series. So this professional learning series is part of that support that we're providing to IHEs. And through this webinar series, we hope to learn from colleagues and NCII experts about topics related to intensive intervention and how we can enhance coursework, field experiences, and professional development opportunities to ensure that teachers are developing the skills they need to deliver intensive intervention. We also are going to be sharing successes, challenges, and lessons learned from pre-service and in-service learning opportunities. So let's go through the agenda for today's webinar. For the first half, we're going to be talking about practice-based opportunities for teacher candidates. Then we're going to transition into talking about video-enhanced performance feedback within teacher clinical experiences, and we'll close out with a question and answer portion and some final considerations and resources. So let's talk about practice-based opportunities and specifically how they relate to intensive intervention. So first things first, what are practice-based opportunities? Well, practice-based opportunities are opportunities that teachers have to integrate content and pedagogy that they acquire through their coursework into their instruction. Simply put, it's teacher candidates being able to take what they learned through coursework and put it into practice within instruction. So practice-based opportunities within the context of effective preparation, it's really combining that high-quality course content with opportunities to practice and receive feedback. So what do practice opportunities look like? Here I want to do a little clarifying of terminology that we hear in the field related to practice-based opportunities. Practice-based opportunities for teacher candidates primarily occur through two avenues. First are in the category of field experiences, where we have those teacher candidates out in the field observing the practice of others. The second are clinical experiences. So these are the opportunities that the teacher candidates themselves have to practice teaching and then receive feedback on their teaching. We hear a lot of different terms used sometimes. Within field experiences, we're often talking about activities such as observations or interviews or shadowing an expert teacher. And for clinical experiences, we also know that a variety of terms are used. Some IHEs use the term internships or residency, or some call it student teaching. So within field experiences and clinical experiences, we are talking about any and all of these activities, but really do want to make a distinction between activities where the teacher candidate is observing the practice of others and activities where they are the one actively practicing. So why is this important for intensive intervention? Well, we know that unfortunately, many teachers who are charged with supporting learners who have severe and persistent academic and behavioral difficulties are often unprepared to give those students what they need in order to be successful. And that's because this intensive intervention, it's a set of very complex skills. Designing and delivering intensive intervention, that is a set of skills that has to be taught, practiced, and refined throughout the teacher preparation experience, and then has to be continued in practice when a teacher reaches the in-service portion. And we really want to make sure that we are refining those skills so that educators can implement these skills with fidelity. Practice-based opportunities have several key features. These are taken from a brief that was published about 4 years ago through the Cedar Center called Learning to Teach, Practice-Based Opportunities in Teacher Preparation. There are 6 features of practice-based opportunities. The first is that practice-based opportunities should include some element of modeling. So teacher candidates need to be able to see what effective evidence-based instruction looks like in practice. They need to see an expert model those skills for them. Practice-based opportunities incorporate elements of spaced learning, where it's the idea that practice opportunities need to occur over a period of time. There need to be multiple practice opportunities, and in between each of those practice opportunities, teachers need feedback on their performance, and they need to be able to reflect on their performance. Practice-based opportunities should incorporate elements of varied learning. So in addition to things that we see being done through field experiences such as interviews or observations or taking a look at curricular materials, those kinds of activities need to be paired with more sustained opportunities for the teacher candidate to be the one who's in the classroom practicing their teaching skills and receiving feedback from an expert. Coaching and feedback is a very, very important part of practice-based opportunities, perhaps the most important part. Teachers need this in order to hone their intensive intervention delivery skills. It's very important that the person giving teachers feedback on their intensive intervention delivery skills has knowledge of data analysis, knowledge of data-based individualization for students, and is able to pinpoint specific areas for teacher candidates of strengths and areas for improvement. Teacher candidates also need opportunities to analyze and reflect on their learning. This is very much a part of that idea of spaced learning opportunities. In between those times when teachers are practicing their instructional skills, they need to be thinking about their practice and areas of strength and improvement. And finally, practice-based opportunities are scaffolded, or they build on one another. We want to gradually release responsibility to our teacher candidates throughout their preparation experience by starting them off with very structured, very supported practice opportunities, and then gradually releasing that independence to them throughout the course of their teacher preparation program, so that by the end they are consistently meeting the expectations of a novice teacher. I want to talk a little bit about meeting the needs of the field, because something I think we are hearing a lot right now in this time of COVID-19 is the idea that there isn't a lot of capacity within schools and districts right now to take on teacher candidates and really give them the supportive practice-based learning opportunities that they need. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because I think it is very fair to say right now that schools and districts are facing unprecedented challenges, and yes, capacity is limited at the moment because schools and districts are dealing with so many other issues. But I want to make a case for why it really is important that schools and districts consider providing practice-based opportunities to teacher candidates to be a central part of the mission, even in these unprecedented times. We know, based on what I just talked about, that teacher candidates need sustained opportunities for practice, reflection, feedback, and support. We also recognize that that has to be balanced with schools and districts and their needs right now. Schools and districts, we know, need guidance for what to do in this time. They need flexibility to be able then to carry out plans for how they're going to make learning work for their students. They need stability. But also, there is a need to not make sure that we are not forsaking that strong pipeline of teachers during this time. It's still important to be laying the foundations for that pipeline. And again, taking on teacher candidates, even though it might be perceived as, one extra thing to think about this fall, it's a good thing to do to ensure that that pipeline remains strong. At the same time, we know that there are student needs, and more so now than ever, and particularly our students with the most severe and persistent learning and behavioral needs who are receiving that Tier 3 intensive intervention. These students are the ones most in need of expert instruction from expert instructors. And if we aren't giving teacher candidates opportunities to practice and receive feedback and reflect on their instruction, then we're not going to have teachers who are ready in a few years to be able to serve these students. We also know these are the students most in need of individualization, supports that are customized to their particular need, and we know continuity of learning is going to be paramount for these students. We talked about the concept of continuity of learning on our last webinar, and it's just something that is going to be very important as we think about what it's going to look like to design and deliver intensive intervention for these students in the fall. So in brief, we have a challenge ahead of us, and that challenge is how can we creatively leverage teacher candidates while providing them with supported practice-based opportunities. I'm going to talk a little bit through the next few slides about creative ways that we can do this throughout that continuum of teacher development and support. And a lot of what I am going to talk through is actually coming from a special issues brief that I highly encourage everyone on this call to take a look at. It's examining how we view teacher candidates as assets in this time of COVID-19, and has some really great, very creative strategies for how we can both meet school and district needs during this time and provide teacher candidates with high quality, sustained practice-based opportunities that are going to help them grow into excellent educators. So let's talk about the stages of candidate development and how these practice-based opportunities might look differently for teacher candidates at different stages. So the first stage is when teacher candidates are developing foundational skills. They're just getting started on their journey to become educators. After that period of building foundational skills, teachers move into a practice of intermediate practice where they are gaining experience in the intensive intervention design and delivery skills that they will need to become experts. And at the end of their trajectory of development as a candidate, we see that point at which they are ready to transition from a teacher candidate to a novice teacher. And at that point, we are in really advanced preparation activities that are very strongly grounded in clinical experiences, and making sure that we are providing candidates with authentic opportunities to practice their teaching skills and receive high quality feedback. So let's talk about that first stage of foundational skills when we have our candidates who are in their first time visiting in a teaching role. So what does this look like? Well, typically these practice-based opportunities are the ones that are occurring at the very beginning of a teacher's preparation experience during their introductory coursework. And as we mentioned, these typically emphasize observation, but they can also include things like interviews, shadowing expert teachers, reviewing curriculum materials, or other activities. These practice-based opportunities, again, these are the field experiences where the thrust is really observing the practice of others, and they tend to be short-term and limited in duration. So how can we both build the skills of our teacher candidates who are in this foundational period of their development and support the needs of schools and districts? Well, there are a few opportunities where teacher candidates can get involved in that intensive intervention design and delivery process, even though they're at this foundational stage. One thing they can do is develop content-focused videos. We know that virtual instruction, the video portions of that for students are becoming a very important and useful way that we can differentiate instruction for students. So candidates could potentially help develop those content-focused videos. Another important thing that these beginning teacher candidates can do is assist veteran teachers with locating and vetting online materials. We can have them creating support materials such as scaffolded notes, graphic organizers, etc. These beginning teacher candidates could monitor small group instruction either in person or online, and they could also be the ones to post and curate materials to learning management systems that a lot of us are using with our students. Preparation providers can provide some supports to help candidates get these kinds of practice-based opportunities early on in their developmental trajectory. We can talk about ways to evaluate the quality of materials, making sure that we're talking about accessibility of educational materials with our teacher candidates, making sure that we evaluate their technical expertise and are providing teaching opportunities that deal with confidentiality and privacy. And another important thing that comes at least at some point during a teacher candidate's career are the completion of the mandated reporting requirements. So an important consideration for prep providers is if we're trying to front load these practice-based opportunities for teacher candidates early on, but doing it in a virtual setting, do we need to require mandated reporting requirements earlier in their career? So let's talk about some more strategies that can help these teacher candidates who are very early on in their developmental trajectory try to increase the number of practice-based opportunities. One thing that you will hear us talk a lot about, particularly in the second half of this presentation, is video analysis and the power of video analysis as a tool for increasing practice-based opportunities and allowing candidates to see examples and non-examples of effective intensive intervention. And in this application with these teacher candidates who are relatively early in their teacher candidacy career, the thrust of the video analysis is really observing the practice of others. And this slide, we included some resources from centers that you are probably familiar with so that you can see some examples and non-examples of effective intensive intervention and share those with your teacher candidates. So we have links to the IRIS Center modules on intensive intervention, the high-leverage-practices.org website, which is maintained through the Council for Exceptional Children in CEDAR, providing intensive intervention as one of the high-leverage practices, and there is a great annotated video that's associated with that, as well as other supporting materials. And of course, last but not least, the National Center on Intensive Intervention's intensive intervention course content. So that course content is ready to use content for faculty and professional development providers. It makes extensive use of video. So this would be a great tool for video analysis to have your teacher candidates observe the practices of others. We have course content resources related to these 4 topics: explicit instruction, math, reading, and behavior support. I'm only going to briefly highlight these today, and I know I did it on the first webinar as well, but I will highlight for all of you that the 3rd installment of our professional learning series, which will happen in October, is going to be a deep dive into these 4 modules and how faculty and professional development providers can use really just the rich depth of resources that are available in these courses to supplement what they are doing with teacher candidates. So highly encourage you to join for that 3rd webinar if you're interested into a deep dive into NCII's intensive intervention course content modules. Now I'm going to kick it over to my colleague Amy Colpo, who's going to take us through what it looks like to increase practice-based opportunities for teacher candidates who are further along in their teacher candidacy career.
Thanks, Lindsay. So after teacher candidates learn foundational skills through their introductory coursework will shift to focus on methods. In addition to this change in coursework, expectations of engagement and time in the classroom will increase and shift in focus. So candidates will need more time in the classroom, either adding additional full days per week to their schedule or doing full weeks for shorter times each day. And not only is their time in the classroom increasing, their responsibilities should as well. Candidates should spend more time teaching whole group lessons and working with both individual and/or small groups. They should also be given experience preparing a unit of instruction to teach so they can gain experience planning units and preparing lessons. go. Thank you. So in this stage, candidates are gaining experience being the lead teacher and taking on the responsibilities that come with that. Those include utilizing methods that they are learning in their coursework, such as targeting skills, assessing gaps, and reteaching with individuals or small groups. This also includes opportunities to facilitate screening and benchmarks, to oversee online activities, and to create review and extension activities. In order for candidates to have these experiences, there are numerous supports that prep programs can provide. One of these is allowing hours to be met either online or in person, especially during this time. Schools may be doing hybrid learning or will move from virtual to online at some point through the year. So it'll be best for students to have the flexibility to meet their hours in all possible scenarios. This also means that prep programs should have a plan in place for how to conduct supervision activities remotely if distance learning is occurring. Along with the flexibility that's needed for candidates to obtain their hours, it may be helpful to assign candidates to a building or team instead of just one teacher. In addition to having that flexibility to get their hours, this will also help candidates be exposed to different methods and have opportunities to practice with different groups of students. And finally, it's recommended that prep programs should also collaborate with districts to meet the most pressing needs of their schools and students. Next slide, please. So microteaching is a great practice-based opportunity for candidates in this stage of intermediate practice. The link on this slide will take you to the one-pager that you will see here. This can be found on the NCII website. After candidates learn new content and strategies in their coursework, they should be provided opportunities to practice by planning a lesson related to the content and teaching it in front of their peers. The benefit and main aspect of microteaching is that candidates can systemically break down the skills they're teaching into smaller parts. So they're able to practice and receive feedback for each part of the lesson before teaching the lesson as a whole in front of students. And after delivering the lesson, candidates should receive feedback and coaching from both the instructor and their peers, and then given the opportunity to refine their teaching before conducting the lesson again in more authentic settings, such as either a virtual simulation or field-based classrooms. Next slide, please. In our advanced preparation phase, teacher candidates are transitioning from teacher candidate to novice teacher. So this stage typically occurs in the final semester or year when coursework has been completed and the candidate is fully immersed in the classroom with opportunities to solo teach. So in this stage, the teaching candidate is typically observed multiple times, and their teaching is connected either with a capstone project at their institution or examinations, such as the EdTPA, for example. And at this point, candidates are expected to demonstrate that they're capable to transition into their first year of teaching on their own. Next slide, please. During their immersion in the classroom, candidates are expected to take full responsibility, which, as I just mentioned, includes ample opportunities for solo teaching. In addition to solo teaching, candidates should have opportunities to engage in both team teaching and co-teaching with another teacher. Candidates should be strategically placed with their supervising teacher or team to balance strengths and needs. And there's numerous ways that preparation programs can support teacher candidates in this advanced preparation phase in their transition to becoming a novice teacher. One is to discuss family engagement strategies. That's especially important as distance learning and hybrid teaching is occurring, and we are not engaging with students or families in person. Strategies for how to engage the family in supporting their students' distance learning work is definitely a critical skill for students to have. Prep programs can also support candidates by providing virtual platforms for mentoring. If student teachers and their supervisors or their mentors at their cooperating school aren't able to meet in person, just having a virtual platform set up for how to learn new skills, how to receive feedback, and mentoring in that way. We also encourage prep programs to provide support by allowing student teachers to demonstrate their skills in unconventional ways and to reconsider evaluation systems. And this is going to require thinking about different ways that teaching can look, especially if we are teaching virtually as opposed to in person. There are some skills that are needed virtually that are not needed in person, whereas there are some skills that are needed in classroom teaching that won't be done virtually. So we encourage prep programs to think about what unconventional ways might be and how they might evaluate their students in those ways. Next slide, please. So Lindsay mentioned video analysis earlier as a way of observing and watching other teachers. This can be used again during this advanced stage, this time to observe one's own teaching. So when candidates are recorded and they have a video to look back on of their teaching, they can watch back to reflect on their teaching to see how the feedback they receive is connecting to their performance. So instead of meeting with a supervisor and being told what they did, they can actually see it and receive the feedback as they're watching what they're doing. Video analysis can also be used to receive ongoing coaching and guidance. It allows more opportunities to receive feedback and to watch your performance rather than just having an in-person observation or in-person feedback. So at this moment, I do want to encourage, if you do have any questions so far, please feel free to put them in the question box and we will be happy to answer them. I'm not seeing any questions now, so I am going to introduce our next presenter and we will have time for more Q&A at the end. So right now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Tara Kazarowski. She is the Assistant Chair of the Department of Special Education at Illinois State University, and she has a lot of exciting things to share with you about video-enhanced performance feedback. So Tara, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm just going to start this off by saying I'm having a few technical difficulties where my video is not allowing access. So I apologize that you're not going to see my face, but I will try to be as animated as I can with my voice. And additionally, I'm not controlling the slides. So we'll try to make this go as smoothly as possible for you. And with that, next slide, please. So today we're going to talk a little bit about clinical experiences, thinking about this fall in particular, because I know a lot of us have anxiety over that, but also in general, some good practices. I'm going to tell you a bit about some of the work we're doing at Illinois State University and at another institution using video analysis, which I'm going to call under a different name today, to help enhance these clinical experiences for our students. So as we know, clinical experiences are critical in any teacher preparation program. And a lot of us are thinking about this fall and what the clinical experience could look like if they're not in traditional settings. Next slide. Things that we are thinking about are, okay, so if they're not going to be in traditional settings, then it's not going to look the same. If they are in person, we are dealing with masks and social distancing, or we are going to be dealing with e-learning. And I'm here to say that there is a lot we can do. I know we are fully prepared at our institution to be able to do clinical experiences very successfully with either of these situations. Next slide. This might feel overwhelming to you as you're planning for this semester or any semester, but the one thing I do want to remind you of is that the evidence-based practices you all know and want our teacher candidates to use, they're not changing. Just the way that we're delivering them is potentially going to change this semester. So let's keep that in our mind. I'm not going to be focusing today on what are those evidence-based practices, but rather how we can facilitate our teacher candidates engaging in those. Next slide. Whatever your logistical circumstances, video recording is likely going to be a critical part of clinical supervision processes this fall. I work at Illinois State University in a very large special education teacher prep program where our teacher candidates are in clinical experiences across the entire state. And for many of us in our state, I know schools are not allowing guests in their schools. So even if our students, our teacher candidates are in the classroom, we know our supervisors are not going to be able to go in with them into the classroom. So we are actually moving to an all e-supervision model, which is going to work itself really, it's going to work out really nicely for video analysis, which we'll talk about today. Next slide. And then before I jump in, I know whenever I discuss video recording, I always get questions piling in immediately because people are quick to ask about two things: cost and permissions related to video recording. And while I'm not going to get into details about it, the short answer is yes, there is usually a cost associated with e-supervision or video recording. But in our case, for us, the cost is actually much lower for us this semester than we pay for supervisor travel around the state. We're also, in terms of permissions, we're also an EdTPA state, so schools are kind of used to us requesting permissions for video recording. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today, but if anyone is interested in following up with me, I can make my email address available to you all. You are welcome to reach out to me, and I can kind of talk you through how we've dealt with those kinds of things. And for today, though, we're going to dive into this content. Next slide. So again, to set the final stage, this is not the semester we've all imagined, but one way we are looking at this in our department is that we have a real silver lining here. When we are planning during a pandemic, we are going to have to embrace practices that we may actually learn a lot from and find a lot of use out of moving forward. I know personally, I'm doing my best to be able to take lessons learned and perhaps transform my practice in the future. I'm actually quite excited to move to e-supervision because I think the benefits outweigh any benefits that we have for some of the face-to-face, and you'll see why. Next slide. All right, so I've been using the phrase video enhanced performance feedback. Earlier in this presentation, you heard the phrase video analysis. I'm talking about the same thing, just some of the, like the book chapter I recently wrote. I've learned that the term video analysis, which is widely used in special education, is used in a different way in other fields. So I tried to come up with a broader term that really gets at the crux of what we're talking about with video analysis, and that's that we're using video as a means of evidence to give our candidates performance feedback. They can do their own self-evaluation, but our supervisors can also use video as that evidence when they are debriefing with students. Next slide. Video in general, there is a lot of literature on this. Video in general can really enhance the reflection process for our students. We have a documentation of student teaching performance. I know a lot of our supervisors have been hesitant to move this way because they love that in-person feel, being able to give students feedback right away after they watch a lesson. But really, we are making a large assumption that when we have a debrief with our students and we explain what were their strengths and what were their areas for improvement, we are making a large assumption that they know what we were talking about. They know what we were describing. When we use video to guide our debriefs, we now are minimizing the possibility of faulty memories. We now have evidence to support our debriefs, and we have accurate representations that really allow for a more granular reflection process. Next slide. I have a little picture here of the book chapter I wrote. If you want to learn more about this, this is kind of a quick overview of what I have in this book chapter. I wrote it with my co-author from SUNY Buffalo State, who's done a lot of this work with me. So we have a chapter on this in this book here. In general, at our institutions, we use video enhanced performance feedback to do a lot of the practices you heard about in the first half of this webinar. One, we really help students notice and evaluate other people's use of specific practices, and that's what we do really early in our programs. We also promote their own self-reflection, and then we use the video to provide feedback for evaluation. Next slide. There are a ton of tools on the market that can help facilitate this. Yes, you could just look at a video, but there are actually tools designed to be able to annotate and facilitate a debriefing session. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about a tool called Mosaic. It's the one at the top of the page, and there are a lot of reasons why we have selected this particular tool. Next slide. In general, I have tested out so many different tools. I know different researchers have used other tools, but in general, I love this tool because we have one of the key features is that when I'm tagging a video, I can actually select video clips, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment, so that I can write annotations and feedback and highlight an exact video clip that I want, which is really nice because then I can create video reels. We can play them all back to back to really facilitate a debriefing process. Every other tool I have found out on the market is more like paused moments and freeze frames. So it doesn't really allow my candidates to go back and rewatch those segments that I want them to see, because they're scrubbing around trying to figure out what it was I was trying to show them. So to me, this is the most important feature of a video analysis or a video enhanced performance feedback tool, that we have annotations that are linked to specific clips that I can select. So I know we're talking about the same things. Other reasons I like this tool is it's a highly secure platform. It uses Amazon Web Services. It's very intuitive, easy to use, and it's probably the most responsive customer support that I found in any tech tool that I've used. Next. There are also a variety of options. I'm not going to get into the details right now because I'll show you them in the video clip that's coming up. But they have a lot of features for different types of tagging options. I can add closed captioning on the video and download transcriptions, which to me is really, really important for accessibility. And I can really easily link this to my rubrics for the students' performance evaluation. We are going to get ready now to switch over to this video clip, and this is going to be interesting because another technical difficulty we're having is trying to get the sound to come through. We have not really found a way to push the sound through, but I'll make sure you have a link to this video if you want to watch it. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the closed captioning, and I'm going to do my best to talk over this 2-minute clip to show you the Mosaic platform and how and the features that it has. So we'll see how this goes.
All right, folks, bear with me for one moment.
I think the closed caption is down there. Oh yeah. Down there. Awesome. So this is a very quick tour of Mosaic, but basically any videos you upload are in that left-hand column, and then students and the supervisor can click to mark up the video. You'll see over there on the right that we have forms, and then at the bottom we have a timeline which will show what I tagged. So you'll see while the video is playing here, there's one type of button over here that's running a code at the bottom that populates in my timeline. That's called a toggle button. And then when you can click it, I can click and add an annotation. So when my students do reflections, we don't write papers that are not linked to evidence. Instead, we do them right here on the video itself. So I'm just populating some moments on the timeline so you'd see what that would look like. Okay, and so I'm showing you now how you can flip through all the different tagged moments over here in Mosaic. All right, and then it has this yellow bar underneath it after you've added a note, so it's really easy. And when I push play all, it kind of just hops from moment to moment. That can really facilitate that debrief for you. There is another type of moment. If you don't want students to have to turn on and off tags, this squared off button here has what's called lead and lag time. So when you click it once, it captures a certain number of seconds before and after that click. You see opportunities to respond. That's really good for something that's really quick like that. So that's another way to quickly get some moments onto your timeline, and then you could actually adjust the length of those instances afterwards. The transcript uses Amazon Web Services to auto-populate, kind of like how YouTube does it, to create captions for you. And what's nice is you could just go in and edit it if there are any errors after you request that transcript. Once you have the transcript correct and you've checked it, you can then push the closed captioning button over here on the video. And now if you have students who need the closed captioning, they'll have access to it. Wow, I talk fast, but that was a lot to try to narrate over. Thank you so much, Lindsay. We'll go to the next slide. So the way we use Mosaic in our, both at Illinois State University and my colleague at Buffalo State, is we follow the STAR framework. And I think this is a really nice, simple framework to really think about in teacher prep programs. STAR stands for see it, try it, and reflect on it. And that comes back to the idea of scaffolding these experiences for students. So early in their programs, we focus a lot more on the see it part. So in other words, I can't expect students to be able to execute evidence-based practices without knowing what it looks like and being able to recognize it when they see it with both examples and non-examples. Eventually in classes, we scaffold that, we let them try it. We do through micro-teaching in classes prior to clinicals, and then in clinical placements, they try it with actual students, and then they reflect on it. Next slide. So we thought, after doing this, I've probably been doing this for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, integrating it throughout our programs. There's some things that you really want to take into consideration when you think about your whole program, is that you want to find that sometimes you can't just tell a student to reflect on a video. Go here, go click some buttons and reflect on it. I've learned very quickly that, and the research indicates this as well, that you really need to show them and teach them how to reflect. We think that is just built into them, but it's not. You want them to focus on specific things, so they can't reflect on everything at once. And you want to show some exemplars of high quality and low quality annotations to guide the process. They need a lot of opportunities to see and practice those target skills. And I often give some questions to go along with the form on Mosaic, and you'll see some examples of those in a moment. Next slide. So let's start with see it. I had see it, try it, and reflect on it. I'm actually going to, I think I'm gonna jump ahead one more slide if you don't mind, just because I think it'll be easier to jump to that one. Thank you. This is an example from Buffalo State. You'll see I have the emblems up in the corner. This is just one of the ways that we focus on that see it part. So this is an example of Anita Archer from Explicit Instruction, and there are a lot of great videos where she models explicit instruction practices. And this is one of the things that we do early on. This is from my colleague at Buffalo State, is that we have students watch those videos within the Mosaic platform. Next slide. So here's an example on the right. You have some example of a student's annotations about this. So we're looking for those elements of explicit instruction. They're watching her video, and you can see the students' tagged moments on the timeline and then what they wrote at those times. What we find when we give video analysis or video enhanced performance feedback, instead of writing a paper, that we have much more specific reflections from our students. You can see it is very concrete, and we know that they're accurately seeing it because I can match that with the video. Next slide. At Illinois State University, one of the classes I teach is a math methods class, and it's really early in their program. I like to start with a single button on my form that I just label good teaching, and I use it as a formative, a pre-assessment for the semester. So I can take one video, assign it to all of the students in my class, and ask them to tag. Now, when they tag the video to look for moments of good teaching, they don't see everyone else's tags if I don't set it that way. So, but when I come back in class, I pull this up for everyone to see. And if you look at that timeline, I can see where all of my students tagged, and we can look for trends. So a lot of times we use this to set the stage for the semester. Okay, so you're all noticing something right here. What were you all describing? Oh, I noticed you described that the teacher had the students discuss something with a partner. So we really use this as a way to really see it and notice practices. Next slide. Throughout the semester, we let that evolve, and of course that's going to be scaffolded depending on where they are in the whole program. But we do want to help the students try it. So now that they know what it looks like in action, we're going to focus on specific elements of explicit instruction or specific evidence-based practices, and we're going to help them try it. We found this is really helpful for helping address their fear of video early on. For us and my friend at Buffalo State, we're both EdTPA states, so we know they're going to have to video record themselves. This is excellent practice for them to kind of just shake off some of that anxiety and jump right in. Next slide. This is an example of a micro-teaching activity that they do at Buffalo State, where they planned a lesson and then they do a peer debrief. They video record teaching it to their peers first. Again, let's get over the fear of the video. Let's practice some of these clinical experience in a low stakes environment, and let's video record it and really use the video recording to facilitate a debrief with the instructor and with your peers. Next slide. At my institution, in that math class I teach, we use a Japanese lesson study format, which is, it's a similar idea to micro teaching, where we work in a small group to co-plan, and then in a cycle, the students take turns one after the other teaching that lesson. Now, we only have them teach like a 10-minute clip of a lesson, but basically they rotate through it while their peers observe them. And the goal is after the first person teaches and their peers observe them, they go into another room to reflect and see if they can make improvements. Then they come back and the next person tries it. So it creates this cycle of teaching and reflection. So we have live in the moment micro-teaching reflection, and we also video record it so they can do their own individual reflection of their teaching in Mosaic afterward. Next slide. The final stage of that scaffolding process is what we use Mosaic for, right? That's that reflect on it process. So it's really important for us to focus on their growth and evidence behind their practice. Next slide. In Mosaic, I already showed you the example where you have those forms. Those few words like eliciting responses, corrective feedback, those are the practices I wanted them to focus on in one of their reflective assignments. But I've found that just those words alone can be interpreted in different ways. So I always find it's better to create some kind of question prompts that they can keep next to them. So you'll see those examples on the left here. Feedback. There's actual questions to guide their thinking along the way. So it's just more than those couple of words. Those feedback prompts, and research supports this as well, are really important to help guide the reflective process. Next slide. This is another example. This is one from my institution where, again, I have words on the forms over here, evidence-based practice, active engagement. But in order for students to really think through what that means, what is it that they're looking for, it's good to give them reflective prompts or questions to guide their thinking. So here's an example of that over here. And just from my experience, probably 4 things is probably the most you can do. Research suggests starting with 1 or 2 things for them to focus on in that reflection. Students can't pay attention to everything at once. Next slide. An example, this is, we have done another thing that was mentioned early in the presentation is to maybe teach in virtual environments. We have done this as well. This is an example of a student teaching to virtual avatars in immersions, or teach live avatars. And again, this is how she wrote her reflection at the end. And I tell you, seeing the students write their reflections this way, they are so much higher quality and meaningful, and they're not just these throwaway assignments anymore. The students really dig deep into their practice when I let them link it right to that video evidence. Next slide. Now, getting back to thinking through this fall. So we've always done, for the last bunch of years, we've done a lot of that see it, try it, reflect on it in our programs. We have some new directions we're considering now. We have set up, so we have licenses for all of our clinical students, and we are going to be using it for e-supervision now. And I'm really, really excited about that. Our clinical supervisors are not going into the schools, so whether the students in an e-learning environment, they can screen record right in the platform to tag their videos, or they can record in the face-to-face classroom. They'll be able to bring that in into the Mosaic platform and have their debriefs using video to guide that for e-supervision this semester. We also have been using it for about 2 semesters now to really take a micro look at their fidelity of implementation in their systematic instruction course. So when we have really intensive interventions happening, we have the students show evidence that they're hitting through a task analysis, they're hitting all the components for fidelity of implementation. So it's been a really great tool to have to facilitate this. And then in pink, it's not really having to do with clinical experiences, but we've actually been using it in our faculty mentorship program to video record ourselves teaching, model best practice for our students, and submitting that as part of our annual portfolios for evaluation of our own teaching. So I think it's a great way for us to model for our teacher candidates that we are also willing to be vulnerable and to really pull apart and grow. And then it's also another way besides student course evaluations to evaluate our teaching in higher ed. Next slide. I have done a little bit of research on this, so I did want to let you know that it's just been some simple survey studies. We had in one semester, we had a sample of 180 students who used Mosaic, And these are students who had used it in one or more of their college courses. And we had about a 60% response rate. So I thought that was pretty good. And I'll just show you, just highlight two big features that the students saw as beneficial. Next slide. First, the students find this very easy to use for their reflection. That's always a question people ask me. How easy is this to use? So yes, they find Mosaic very easy to use for their reflections. And next slide. They are overwhelmingly saying that Mosaic is helping them notice their strengths and areas for improvement. Other questions we asked, I don't have it on these slides, but almost all of them agree that they would rather use something like this than write a traditional essay, that they find it more meaningful than writing an essay, and the instructors found it much more valuable in terms of really being able to target their feedback to students. Next slide. So these are just a couple of the comments that also show what I just said. It made it easy. It's good practice for EdTPA. They can visually see what they're doing and reflecting on it. They're really noticing the same things that I was hoping that they would notice from using this. Next slide. And then I'm going to leave you here today with just a few questions for consideration as you're thinking about moving forward. If this is something you're interested in, is to really think about throughout your programs, how are you currently evaluating their performance or skill-based outcomes? Are you really relying on faulty memory to give that kind of feedback? Sometimes we are so busy taking notes about what the students are doing when we're watching them that we can miss other things. So I just love the idea of having solid evidence behind that feedback that we're giving them. I don't have to read you the list of these questions, but I really want you to think through, are there ways to enhance this ability for your students to reflect and for your supervisors to really look at their practice in their own classroom and the students' practice out within the clinical sites. I'm happy to talk with anyone. Like I said, I'm happy to share my contact info if this is something you're interested in talking through more about the logistics of a program like this. But I wanted to share it with you because we've had just such great success with it. Next slide. I think that's the end. Questions? Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tara. We do have a few questions in the chat box. Since we have a few minutes, we'll go through a few of them. Someone wants to know, do you use the student notations for See It as assessments, or do you give them feedback on their feedback? Not sure about the last part of that question, but do you use the student notations for See It as assessments?
Oh, that's a great question. We use it for formative assessment only, though I can see if you really wanted them, you could use it as a summative assessment, I'm sure. But we try to make this more of a growing and learning opportunity, so it's for formative assessment in our classes. They have a few different assignments where they get credit just for doing it and trying it. And then within the Mosaic platform, if a student added an annotation, I can comment back to them. So we both can comment back and forth on the same tagged moment, which is really nice. So yes, I do often comment back if I didn't think they were quite seeing something in the right way.
Do you use a specific assessment tool to evaluate lesson delivery for the student's capstone experience?
Great. So in the preclinical courses, the math methods course I teach is the semester before they start like a 3-semester sequence of clinicals. And so in my class, I really want it to be very low stakes for their teaching. So again, it's only formative assessment. I do not grade them on how well they teach. I only grade them on how well they reflect on their teaching. So my rubrics are all geared on their reflection in Mosaic. And again, I am happy to compile some of these resources. If you want to send me an email, I don't know what the best way to facilitate that is, but I have a lot of these. I'm happy to share my rubrics for you to see them and kind of put them into a folder that could be shared. I do know for clinical experiences, they have rubrics that they're currently using to evaluate their teaching performance, and we're just converting those all into a way that we can connect it into Mosaic. So we're using the rubrics they always used, but now just Mosaic becomes the evidence. It does let me tag, like if I had a rubric, I can attach a PDF of that rubric to their tagged annotation, so it stays with the video.
Great. We also have a question about do you have any guidance or forms you recommend for students to use while completing video analysis on their own teaching? I think you
I would say I did a bit. I would also say it probably just depends on what it is that you want. What's the focus of your lesson? Like anything else, the research does indicate that you don't want them to focus on too much at once. So kind of pick the things that you think are critical in that, or maybe rotate through some different pieces and really hyper focus those reflections. I go up to 4 different areas, and sometimes I find that's a little too much.
Great. We do have a question from someone who says their district is having them use, or their school is having them use GoReact. They want to know if you are familiar with that, and if so, what are the biggest differences between GoReact and Mosaic?
Got it. Yes, I'm very familiar with GoReact. I've had lots of meetings with them. It's very, well, first of all, it's very user-friendly, super easy to use. The pricing model is very different from GoReact to Mosaic, so it's probably a wash in the long run, but I won't get into those details right now. But GoReact, the biggest difference is that none of the other platforms, including GoReact, tag moments with duration. It's always a freezed moment in time that you add a comment onto. So to me, the biggest downfall is that students don't engage in the recursive reflective process when all you have is a frozen moment in time. So if a student goes in and adds a comment, I don't know exactly what they wanted me to see. Whereas when my students tag a video, they have to select a moment with a beginning, middle, and an end, and I know the story they want to tell. I can push a play all button and see the video highlights reel of what they want to show me with their feedback that pops up. And to me, I haven't found another platform that does that besides Mosaic, and that is the most valuable reflective tool that I have found.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tara, for sharing with us. We have a few final considerations that we want to share with you before we leave you for today. The first is to plan for the possibility of rapid transitions between instructional modes. It's not a surprise to anyone here that there's a lot happening right now. Different states, different districts are doing a variety of things with reopening schools. There's hybrid, there's signing up to come in person, there's fully virtual. So I think flexibility here is key, and just be ready for if you have teacher candidates that are in the classroom, just being prepared, whether that's virtually or having to go in person or whatnot. I think flexibility is key here as we deal with the possibility of these transitions with this unknown time. On that note of flexibility, building flexibility into partnership agreements, especially since we're still not sure how teaching practicums and field experiences might work. Having that communication with your partner school or district and your IHE, and making sure that there's flexibility so that your teacher candidates can get their hours and get the experiences that they need to be successful as novice teachers. And then again, exercising creativity and providing candidates with practice-based opportunities. Tara just shared a lot of great ideas for how to use video analysis, video-enhanced feedback. So thinking of other creative ways as well, and flexible ways to provide candidates with these opportunities, provide them with mentoring, with feedback, and a variety of experiences to prepare them for this time. Can I go to the next slide, please? We want to make sure you are aware of our webpage that we have for this faculty learning series. You'll see the link here. You can access recordings, transcripts, and slide decks from today and past webinars on this site. We will have today's webinar posted shortly, and any supporting information there. So this one website is where you can find all of your information from this faculty learning series. And then on the next slide, we have information about our next 2 webinars in this series. Webinar 3 is taking place October 7th, which seems far away, but I'm sure it'll be here before we know it. That'll be on course content resources for intensive intervention. And then our 4th webinar in this series will be December 1st from 3 to 4, and that will be on continuous program improvement. So if you click the links On this slide, it will take you to the registration page. Just a reminder that you do have to register separately for each webinar. It's not one registration, so make sure you're aware of that. And we hope to see you there. And then we also have our information on our next slide here to reach myself, Lindsay, or Tara. We have our email addresses. We encourage you to check out the NCII website, visit us on Twitter. We also have a YouTube channel. If you have any questions about today, feel free to email us. And I'm not sure if you want to add anything, Lindsay, but I just want to say thank you to Tara for joining us. And thank you all for joining us today for our second webinar.
Well, thank you, Amy, and I'll add my thanks to Dr. Kazarowski, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. Goodbye.